Imagine pulling a $10 bill from your wallet. You glance at the face printed on it, Alexander Hamilton, a founding father, an immigrant, a war hero, the architect of American finance. But what if that quiet piece of paper carried a secret? What if the man staring back at you didn't just help build America, but quietly planted the seed of its greatest collapse? Because the truth is uncomfortable. The United States didn't fall into debt by accident. It didn't stumble into a financial trap. It was designed, and it started with Hamilton. In 1789, America was barely standing. 13 fragile states, fresh out of a brutal war, united by optimism and exhaustion. Independence had been won, but freedom came with a terrifying bill: $77 million in debt. At the time, it was an impossible sum, larger than the country's entire annual income. Farmers, soldiers, foreign governments, and European bankers all held scraps of paper promising payment from a nation that barely existed. Many Americans had a simple solution: don't pay, default, walk away. Why should a poor farmer in Virginia repay a Dutch banker who funded a distant war? It was a popular idea, logical, tempting. But then Hamilton stepped forward. He was young, brilliant, relentless. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, he saw something others didn't. Where most saw debt as a curse, Hamilton saw leverage, control, power. In January 1790, he delivered a document to Congress that stunned the room, the first report on public credit. 40,000 words that would redefine how governments think about money. His proposal was radical. The federal government would not only pay its debts in full, it would assume all the debts of the individual states. A single national debt, one balance sheet, one obligation. A national debt, if it is not excessive, Hamilton wrote, will be to us a national blessing. That sentence changed history. Hamilton believed debt could bind the wealthy to the survival of the government. If banks and elites owned government bonds, they would protect the nation because their fortunes depended on it. Debt would create loyalty, stability, creditworthiness. A country without debt, he argued, was a country no one trusted. Jefferson and Madison were horrified. They saw corruption, speculation. Northern elites buying debt from desperate Southern farmers for pennies on the dollar, only to be repaid at full value. They called it immoral, a betrayal, a gift to the rich at the expense of future generations. Hamilton didn't flinch. A contract is a contract, he argued. If the government chooses who gets paid and who doesn't, trust dies. And without trust, credit dies. And without credit, the nation dies. After months of bitter debate, a deal was struck over dinner. Hamilton would get his debt plan. The South would get a new capital on the Potomac River. And just like that, America's national debt was born, not out of desperation, but by deliberate design. By 1791, the federal government carried $75 million in debt, and Hamilton had no intention of eliminating it. He wanted permanent debt, refinanced, rolled over, controlled, but never gone. Jefferson called it a moral crime against the unborn. History would prove both men right and wrong. For more than a century, the system seemed to work. Debt rose during wars. It fell during peace. The War of 1812 pushed it higher. Andrew Jackson later wiped it out entirely in 1835, the only time America has ever been debt-free. He celebrated it as a moral victory. It lasted 1 year. The Panic of 1837 arrived, and the debt came back. Jackson died, never seeing his dream survive. Then came the Civil War. For the first time, America truly exploded its debt. Bonds flooded the market. Greenbacks were printed. By 1865, the debt had reached $2.7 billion, 40 times higher than before the war. Each citizen effectively owed a year's salary. And yet the rule still held. Wars justified debt. Peace demanded repayment. By 1916, despite massive growth, the debt stood at only $1.2 billion. America kept its promise. Then the world changed. World War I shattered the old discipline. 2 years of fighting pushed debt to $27 billion. Still, in the 1920s, America tried to return to normal. Budgets tightened. Debt fell. By 1929, it dropped to $16 billion. It seemed the system still worked. Then the Great Depression arrived. Banks collapsed. Unemployment hit 25%. Hunger spread. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt did something no president had ever dared to do. He borrowed in peacetime, not for war, but to save the economy. The New Deal rewrote the rules. Government spending became a tool for survival. Roads, bridges, jobs, programs, paid for with borrowed money. By 1936, the debt doubled again. Critics screamed, supporters cheered, but the line had been crossed. Debt was no longer an emergency measure. It was policy. And the real explosion hadn't even begun yet. When World War II arrived, everything before it looked small. From 1941 to 1945, the United States spent more money than it had in its entire previous history combined. Factories ran day and night. Soldiers crossed oceans. Entire industries were reborn. And almost all of it was paid for with debt. War bonds flooded the nation. Movie stars begged citizens to buy them. Children collected coins. Debt became patriotic. By the end of the war, the national debt stood at $260 billion, nearly 120% of GDP. Each American effectively owed an entire year of income. And yet, something remarkable happened. The economy grew faster than the debt. During the post-war boom, wages rose, productivity exploded, infrastructure expanded. Debt didn't disappear, but it shrank relative to the size of the economy. By the 1950s, the ratio had fallen dramatically. This was the golden age, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The Cold War demanded constant military spending, nuclear weapons, missiles, bases around the world. Defense consumed over half the federal budget. Even President Eisenhower, a general himself, warned of the danger of the military-industrial complex. No one listened. Then Lyndon Johnson arrived with a vision called the Great Society. He wanted to eliminate poverty, provide health care, expand education, protect the vulnerable, and at the same time, he escalated the Vietnam War. Guns and butter, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, housing subsidies, grants. Benefits that never expire and grow automatically. By 1969, debt had climbed to $353 billion. Inflation accelerated. Deficits became permanent. Johnson didn't just increase debt, he created machines that consume money endlessly. From that moment on, debt was no longer tied to crisis. It became routine. Then came Ronald Reagan. He spoke like a fiscal conservative, called debt immoral, warned of stealing from future generations, and then tripled the national debt. Tax cuts slashed revenue. Military spending exploded. Social programs survived untouched. Deficits of $200 billion a year became normal in peacetime. Reagan knew the gamble. Let debt grow now to limit future spending later. It failed. Debt became bipartisan. By the 1990s, America was the world's largest debtor. Then, briefly, a miracle. The dot-com boom sent revenues soaring. Budgets balanced. Surpluses appeared. For a moment, the government paid down debt. Economists even worried about running out of bonds. The moment didn't last. George W. Bush cut taxes, launched 2 wars, borrowed trillions. Then the financial system collapsed in 2008. By 2009, debt reached nearly $12 trillion. Barack Obama inherited chaos. He spent to stop collapse. Stimulus, bailouts, healthcare reform. Debt doubled again. Then came Donald Trump. He called himself the king of debt and proved it. Another massive tax cut. Deficits before crisis. Then COVID. $5 trillion in emergency spending in 2 years. By 2021, debt passed $30 trillion. and it kept growing. By 2025, American debt crossed $38 trillion. That number is too big to feel real. So think of it this way. The government now spends over $3.3 billion every single day just on interest. More than defense, more than healthcare. And the math is getting worse. For decades, low interest rates hid the problem. Borrowing was cheap, almost free. But that era is over. Rates jumped. Old debt must be refinanced at higher costs. A third of the debt rolls over every year. Soon, interest alone will consume the budget. At the same time, America is aging. Social Security and Medicare expand automatically. Fewer workers support more retirees. Deficits will grow even if politicians try to stop them. There are only 4 possible endings: print money, inflate the currency, destroy the dollar, default, crash markets, wipe out pensions, austerity, double taxes, cut spending by 85%, politically impossible, or slow decline. The most likely path: bridges crumble, infrastructure decays, schools fall behind, power shifts elsewhere, not a collapse, a fade. Hamilton believed debt would bind the nation together. Instead, it bound the future. The bill will come due. Math never lies. The only question is who will be holding the check when the music stops. Imagine the moment when confidence finally cracks. Not with a dramatic announcement, not with a single vote in Congress, but with a quiet shift in behavior that almost nobody notices at first. It starts with hesitation. Foreign buyers begin demanding slightly higher yields to hold U.S. bonds. Nothing alarming, just a fraction of a percent. Analysts call it healthy repricing. Politicians dismiss it as noise. The markets shrug. After all, America has always paid its bills. Always. But debt doesn't collapse from disbelief. It collapses from arithmetic. Every year, trillions of dollars in old bonds mature and must be replaced with new ones. When rates were near zero, refinancing felt painless. Now it feels like rolling a snowball uphill. Each cycle adds weight. Each rollover locks in higher costs. And unlike past decades, there is no demographic tailwind coming to save the system. The workforce is shrinking relative to retirees. Productivity gains are slowing. Global competition is intensifying. The easy growth years are gone. So the government does what it has always done when cornered. It borrows more. That's when the feedback loop tightens. Higher debt means higher interest payments. Higher interest payments mean larger deficits. Larger deficits mean more borrowing. And more borrowing pushes rates even higher. This is the debt spiral economists warn about, but rarely admit is already in motion. At some point, the bond market stops being patient, not angry, just rational. Investors begin to ask a dangerous question, not, will the U.S. default tomorrow, but what is the least painful way this ends? Because once that question is asked, the answer is never good. The Federal Reserve steps in, quietly at first, buying bonds to stabilize markets, injecting liquidity, reassuring everyone that tools exist. And they do, temporarily. But money creation is not neutral. It leaks into prices, slowly at first, then all at once. Wages lag behind. Savings lose value. The middle class feels poorer without understanding why. They blame corporations, politicians, each other. Trust erodes. The dollar, once unquestioned, becomes debated. Other nations hedge. Trade agreements diversify. Reserves shift gradually, then suddenly. No dramatic collapse. Just fewer people choosing the dollar when alternatives exist. At home, budgets become cruel. Every dollar spent on interest is a dollar not spent on roads, schools, research, or defense. Choices get sharper. Benefits promised decades ago collide with revenues that no longer grow fast enough to sustain them. Politicians face impossible math and impossible voters. Cut spending and millions lose benefits they were promised. Raise taxes and growth slows further. Inflate and everyone pays silently through rising prices. Default and the entire financial system fractures. So they delay. Delay is the true American strategy. Short-term bills, temporary fixes, emergency measures that quietly become permanent. Each administration pushes the problem just far enough into the future that it belongs to the next one, until one day there is no future left to push into. The crisis doesn't announce itself with sirens. It arrives like gravity, inevitable, silent, indifferent. Markets open lower one morning and never fully recover. Pension funds reprice. Insurance companies scramble. Banks tighten lending. Businesses freeze hiring. People feel it before they understand it. Credit card rates spike. Mortgages vanish. Government payments arrive late or smaller than expected. Confidence, once lost, does not return easily. And then the realization settles in. This was never about one president or one party or one policy. It was about a decision made centuries ago and repeated ever since, the belief that debt could always be managed later. Hamilton believed debt would discipline the nation by binding its elites to its survival. Instead, it disciplined future generations by removing their choices. Every dollar already promised is a dollar they can't decide how to use. The tragedy is not that debt exists. Debt can be useful, powerful, necessary. The tragedy is scale. When debt grows faster than the economy forever, the ending is predetermined. Not by ideology, not by politics, by math. And math does not negotiate. Somewhere in the future, a generation will look back and ask a simple question. When did we know this couldn't last? The answer is uncomfortable. We always knew. We just kept dancing, because the music was loud, the lights were bright, and the bill was far away, until it wasn't. And when the music finally stops, there will be no villains standing alone. Only a long chain of choices, stretching back to a $10 bill and a sentence written in 1790 that sounded brilliant and proved dangerously incomplete. A national debt can be a blessing, but only until it becomes destiny.